So what we changed at Dear Digital is that we are trying to really connect more with the local retailers, and it has been a really interesting journey up until now, because what we see now is that a lot of these niche local systems really keep those merchants very small. They want to do all of these flows that they hear about and they hear other people talk about and they see it on the internet, etc. And it's quite insane to see how much it really impacts them, because if they have an online system, which could be on a Shopify or a WooCommerce or whatever, it's never integrated with their retail POS system. And it's just insane how many people, and this was really hard for me to believe at first, but I now see it firsthand, so I really start to believe it, that they really type over a lot of stuff and they lose a crazy amount of time. Yeah, a lot of manual work. And if you then think about the gift cards and the online versus the physical experience, etc., there is just such a big gap to be closed with those local systems. And if you see this like really day to day and you see how much time people lose, you really start to understand what the power of the unified commerce, which is like a classic buzzword type of thing, but what it really is and what it could mean for those merchants that are actually not really staffed like hugely normally. I mean, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and they put so much time and effort into typing it from one system to the next, that you just wonder indeed, like, how much will they be able to do more to really build on their business if they can go to a unified system such as Shopify, where you can sell online, B2B, and in store. And it's just quite amazing of how much those systems can really do if you just hear the real stories of those merchants. And so I really indeed wonder what is still the position of those local systems if you just think of the vast change that implementing such a unified system will get towards.
I think it has worked really well for them, and I'm pretty sure some of them are financially in a worse situation though, but it has worked really well because they could really listen to a niche, they could really talk to the customer and then develop features for them. And so obviously no fault of theirs, they've done their job wonderful. But now I think the reverse, let's say, philosophy is happening where you have a behemoth like Shopify who's building tons and tons of features for 80% of their merchants, let's say, of just the worldwide merchants. And now the pace is just something they can't keep up with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think now we used to have local expectations, and so local merchants and local consumers, those expectations matched. But now with the online world changing so hard, you have global expectations, by which I mean we now expect everything to be unified because we're now, let's say, we're used to those systems from other bigger platforms. Mm-hmm. And now the local merchant doesn't match with the local expectation because they still offer a very old school type of software and the user experience is different.
Yep.
And so I think it matched really well a few years ago where you had the local expectations, the local software, but now you have the global expectations and you need the global software. And that's the hard thing, I think, to keep up with because expectations are evolving continuously fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then obviously the hard thing is also the change management, right? Because a lot of those, if we talk about, or we talk with those retailers, they say, we've been working with those systems for 10, 15 years. And indeed, we had that communication and that personal bond with the vendor that actually made the system for us. And then it's a big switch for a lot of them to change to a system where it's a bit more anonymously. I mean, you talked about the negative parts of having this personal connection, but they also have positive sides in the sense that it makes you feel very connected to the vendor that comes to your door and you can talk about a lot of stuff with them. So I think that there is a very important role for agencies like us to start to become that communication line because they cannot necessarily have it directly with Shopify. So I think it's, especially in the physical retail, there will be a big change with the agencies that were currently implementing Shopify, that they have to take on this new role of also being very physically, locally entrenched. So that those customers, because those retailers are so used to working with those other systems, to make sure that we have this local connection as well.
Yeah,
we
capture their needs, right? Because Shopify works for 80% of them, and then the 20% needs to be closed by the agencies, the partners, and these things. Because what I've often seen is that's where it actually is going wrong, is that with the local systems, it's often the software vendor is exactly the same person as doing the support for the software. And so when there's a lot of work, it means that the support can't follow. When there's not enough work, they need to lay off people. And so support is never great when the software vendor is trying to do support as well. While partners as ours from a Shopify ecosystem, for example, we can deliver way more because that's our type of business.
Mm-hmm. And the things that we have to listen to from the discussions that I had, I identified two big parts which I really want to work on and I'm super excited about, is that they basically have two big costs as a retailer. One is their inventory, and they have to make sure that they manage that very well, because if you just buy inventory that you cannot sell, your money is just tied up in this inventory that is just sitting there idle. And then on the other hand, it's staff, because it's really hard to find good retail staff. One, they don't want to necessarily work with legacy systems, and you want to have a system that supports you to be flexible, to make sure that you make the right decision on a staff level. And so that is also what we want to really focus on. So we want to make sure that we implement the system in such a way that we have all the reporting there so that you can buy the right stuff and make sure that not as much money or too much money is tied up into idle stock that is just laying around there. And then on another level, we want to make sure that the planning of the staff, basically also throughout the year, things change. There are certain events that make sure that people don't come to the store because they're busy with other stuff, depending on the niche that you're focusing on. For example, if you're a man's store or a store for men, then on the biggest cyclocrosses or whatever of the year, people will just not come into your business. And if you have a sense of this in your system where you plan your staff in, I think it can make a huge impact on your profit and your revenues of your store. So I'm really just...
and I think those are the more typical things that probably Shopify won't be developing, because those are too specific to a certain local market, and that's where indeed like the bridge needs to be crossed between the merchant and between Shopify.
Yep.
And I wonder, and I think that might be the case, offline has been around way longer, which means that the processes, the habits, the change management will be way harder, while online is fairly recent. And there the change management, either they didn't have a store or they had a legacy system, and just in general, the change management is just way easier on online. And so we're now entering a market with the offline that's, much heavier on the change management.
Yep. And their local entrenchment and connection is also, again, super important, I would say.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.